The wind cut across the open plains like a blade, lifting dust and dry grass into the gray afternoon sky. Winter was coming early that year, and everyone felt it in their bones. The land was tight, the work was scarce, and hope was thinner than the soil beneath worn boots. Along the dirt road that led toward the ranchlands, a woman walked slowly, her steps uneven, her body tired in a way that went far beyond exhaustion. She held the hand of a small boy whose coat was too big and too torn, its sleeves frayed at the cuffs. Every few steps, the child stumbled, and she would steady him, whispering soft words meant more to convince herself than him. Her name was Clara, and hunger had become her constant companion. It lived in the hollow ache in her stomach, in the way her head spun when she stood too fast, and in the quiet fear that settled in her chest every time her son asked when they would eat again. The boy, Samuel, had stopped crying days ago. Hunger had made him silent, and that silence frightened her more than tears ever could. They had come from a town that no longer offered them anything but closed doors. Clara's husband had died the previous winter in an accident at the mill, crushed beneath a beam that snapped without warning. The compensation promised never came, swallowed by paperwork and excuses. She had worked when she could, scrubbing floors, mending clothes, doing anything that earned a coin or a crust of bread. But work dried up, and so did kindness. People who once nodded at her now looked away, as if poverty were contagious. By the time she reached the ranch road, her pride was already worn thin, but it was still there, fragile and aching. She had one last hope. Ranchers always needed hands, especially before winter. She could cook, clean, tend animals if she had to. All she asked for was food. Just enough to keep her child alive. The ranch sat beyond a split-rail fence, white and solid, its barns standing like silent guardians against the sky. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, thin but steady, promising warmth and a meal she could almost taste. Clara hesitated at the gate. She wiped dust from her face, straightened Samuel's coat, and took a breath that shook despite her efforts to steady it. The man who owned the ranch, known to most as Thomas Hale, was repairing a broken latch near the barn when he saw them. At first, he thought they were travelers who had lost their way. Then he noticed the way the woman stood, shoulders tense, eyes alert yet tired, like someone bracing for rejection. He had seen that look before. He had worn it himself once, many years ago. Thomas was not always a rancher with land and cattle. He had grown up poor, raised by a father who believed in hard work and a mother who believed in kindness even when there was little to spare. After his parents died, Thomas spent years drifting, taking whatever work he could find. There were days when he went to sleep hungry, too proud to beg, too tired to keep knocking on doors. Those memories never left him, no matter how much success came later. Clara approached slowly, stopping a few steps away as if crossing an invisible line. Samuel hid behind her leg, peeking out with wary eyes. She cleared her throat, her voice rough from cold and disuse. "Sir," she said, lowering her gaze. "I'm looking for work. Any kind. I can cook, clean, help around the house or the fields. I'll work hard. I just need some bread. For my boy." She forced herself to say it all in one breath, afraid that if she paused, she would lose her nerve. Her hand tightened around Samuel's, feeling how small and thin his fingers were. Thomas studied her quietly. He saw the wear on her boots, the way her coat hung loose on her frame, the faint tremor in her hands. He saw the child's pale face and sunken eyes. But more than that, he saw her pride. She wasn't begging. She was offering something she still had, her willingness to work, her dignity. For a moment, the wind was the only sound between them. Clara's heart pounded so hard she thought he might hear it. She had prepared herself for refusal, for a polite excuse or a harsh dismissal. She had even prepared herself to beg if she had to, though the thought made her stomach twist with shame. Thomas finally straightened, wiping his hands on a cloth. He walked toward them, not too fast, not too slow, as if careful not to startle them. "How long since you last ate?" he asked gently. Clara hesitated, then answered honestly. Yesterday morning. My son had a bit of soup last night. I didn't. Samuel looked up at her, surprised, and she felt a pang of guilt. She had tried to shield him from the truth, but children sensed more than adults liked to admit. Thomas nodded once, his jaw tightening. He glanced toward the house, then back at them. Come inside, he said. Relief washed over Clara so suddenly that her knees nearly gave out. But relief was quickly followed by fear. She had been turned away before after being invited in, scolded for wasting someone's time. She swallowed hard and nodded, guiding Samuel forward. Inside the house, warmth wrapped around them like a blanket. The smell of bread and stew filled the air, so rich it made Clara's eyes sting with tears she refused to let fall. Thomas pulled out chairs at the table and set plates in front of them without ceremony. Eat, he said simply. Clara froze, her hands hovering above the plate. Sir, I haven't earned. Thomas raised a hand, stopping her gently but firmly. You don't have to earn food, he said. Not today. Her pride flared, fragile and defensive. I can work, she insisted. I don't want charity. He met her gaze, his eyes steady. And I'm not offering charity, he replied. I'm offering a meal. That's all. She searched his face for mockery or pity and found neither. Slowly, she nodded. Samuel didn't wait. He picked up his spoon with shaking hands and began to eat, careful at first, then faster as hunger overpowered manners. Clara watched him, her heart breaking and healing all at once. Only when he was eating steadily did she allow herself to take a bite. The food was hot and filling, and she had to pause, breathing through the ache in her stomach as it adjusted. They ate in silence, broken only by the soft clink of utensils. Thomas busied himself at the counter, giving them space, though he watched out of the corner of his eye to make sure they were eating enough. When the plates were nearly empty, Clara finally spoke again. Thank you, she said quietly. I'll work now. Whatever you need. Thomas turned, leaning against the table. There will be work, he said. Plenty of it. But you're not working for bread. Confusion crossed her face. I don't understand. He took a breath, choosing his words. You offered to work because you didn't want to beg. I respect that. But no one should have to trade their dignity for a meal. Keep your pride, he said, his voice firm but kind. I'll feed you both. The words struck her harder than hunger ever had. Tears welled despite her efforts, spilling over before she could stop them. She covered her face, ashamed of crying in front of a stranger, but Thomas didn't look away. I lost my husband, she said through sobs, the truth pouring out now that the dam had broken. I've tried. I really have. I just needed someone to see me, not just the hunger. Thomas listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded slowly. You're seen, he said. In the days that followed, Clara and Samuel stayed at the ranch. Thomas gave them a small room near the kitchen, warm and clean. Clara insisted on helping wherever she could, cooking meals, mending clothes, tending the garden. Thomas never stopped her from working, but he also never made her feel like she owed him her life for it. Word spread quietly among the ranch hands that the boss had taken in a woman and her child. Some were curious, others skeptical, but Thomas paid them no mind. He judged people by how they worked and how they treated others, and Clara proved herself quickly. She worked hard, but more importantly, she brought warmth into the house, a sense of care that had been missing without anyone realizing it. Samuel began to change too. Color returned to his cheeks, and laughter found its way back into his voice. He followed Thomas around the ranch, asking endless questions, and Thomas answered them all with patience he didn't know he still possessed. In the boy, he saw echoes of himself as a child, curious and eager despite hardship. Winter arrived with heavy snow and bitter cold, but the ranch stood strong. The house was warm, the pantry full. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Clara realized something had shifted inside her. For the first time since her husband's death, she wasn't just surviving. She was living. She looked at Thomas, at the man who had given her more than food, who had given her back her dignity. "I don't know how to repay you," she said softly. He smiled, a rare, gentle smile. "You already have," he replied. "By staying human when the world tried to strip that from you." Outside, the wind howled, but inside the ranch house, there was warmth, food, and a quiet understanding that sometimes the greatest kindness is not in what is given, but in how it is given. And for Clara and Samuel, that kindness changed the course of their lives forever.